So today we have a unique blessing upon us. It's a rare occurrence when we can come to the confluence of the two great rivers, Bhagavad-Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. We were studying Srimad Bhagavatam, third canto, and we read about, we heard from Maitreya about how the material creation begins with the glance of Mahavishnu over the Pradhan, and how all the different elements were not conglomerating properly. So the Lord entered with his time energy, Kali, into those ingredients, and then expanded himself into Garbhodakshaya Vishnu as the different universes, like bubbles in the ocean, started to manifest. Then within each universe, the Lord expands himself completely. I was outside this morning looking up and just trying to conceive of how gigantic a universal form is. Our perception is so small when we look up to the sky. This form of the Lord expands from the lowest part of the universe up to the toppest regions and to both sides. It completely envelops the entire place. So after describing that, we veered off course along the Srimad Bhagavatam river and traveled over to the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 11 river. And for the last few weeks, we've been studying the manifestation of the universal form to Arjuna, which we almost ended. We practically did end that description last week, but now Arjuna and Krishna are discussing, and Krishna's come back to his original four-armed form and then his two-armed form, and their reciprocation will conclude that chapter. And then we'll begin with chapter 7, where Vidura, after hearing this description of the universal form by Maitreya, asks several questions. So let us switch over now to the texts. So we're at Srimad Bhagavatam study, February 2022, lessons 4 and 5. But that also, as just mentioned, includes Bhagavad Gita. We'll start with chapter 11, text 51. When Arjuna thus saw Krishna in his original form, he said, "O Janardhan, seeing this human-like form, so very beautiful, I am now composed in mind, and I am restored to my original nature." Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Here the words Manusam Rupam clearly indicate the Supreme Personality of Godhead to be originally two-handed. Those who deride Krishna to be an ordinary person are shown here to be ignorant of his divine nature. If Krishna is like an ordinary human being, then how is it possible for him to show the universal form and again to show a four-handed Narayan form? So it is very clearly stated in Bhagavad Gita that one who thinks that Krishna is an ordinary person and misguides the reader by claiming that it is the impersonal Brahman within Krishna speaking is doing the greatest injustice. Krishna has actually shown his universal form and his four-handed Vishnu form. So how can he be an ordinary human being? A pure devotee is not confused by misguiding commentaries on Bhagavad Gita because he knows what is what. The original verses of Bhagavad Gita are as clear as the sun. They do not require lamplights from foolish commentators. Sama? Unmute.
Okay. Hare Krishna, everyone. Thank you for attending. If you don't feel like you want to read today, just send me a little note in the chat. But of course, we want to hear from everyone. But it's up to you if you want to read. Thank you. And we'll start off now with Vaishnavi. Would you like to read this one, please?
Okay. Bhagavad-Gita 11:52. The Blessed Lord said, My dear Arjuna, the form which you are now seeing is very difficult to behold. Even the demigods are ever seeking the opportunity to see this form which is so dear. Purport. In the 48th verse of this chapter, Lord Krishna revealing his universal form, and informed Arjuna that this form is not possible to be seen by so many activities, sacrifices, etc. Now, here the word Sudarshanam is used, indicating that Krishna's two-handed form is still more confidential.
Go on.
Purport. Those who are in search of knowledge also speculate on Krishna and consider him to be less important than the universal form of the Supreme. Thus, some think that the universal form of Krishna, which was manifested to Arjuna, is more important than his personal form. According to them, the personal form of Supreme is something imaginary. They believe that in the ultimate issue, the absolute truth is not a person, but the transcendental process is described in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, to hear about Krishna from authorities. That is the actual Vedic process. And those who are actually in the Vedic line hear about Krishna from authority, and by repeated hearing about him, Krishna becomes dear. As we have several times discussed, Krishna is covered by his Yogamaya potency. He is not to be seen or revealed to anyone and everyone. Only by one to whom he reveals himself can he be seen. This is confirmed in Vedic literature. For one who is a surrendered soul, the absolute truth can actually be understood. The transcendentalist, by continuous Krishna consciousness and by devotional service to Krishna, can have his spiritual eyes opened and can see Krishna by revelation. Such a revelation is not possible even for the demigods. Therefore, it is difficult even for the demigods to understand Krishna. And the advanced demigods are always in hope of seeing Krishna in his two-handed form. The conclusion is that although to see the universal form of Krishna is very, very difficult and not possible for everyone and anyone, it is still more difficult to understand Krishna in his personal form as Shyam Sundara.
Okay. Before we change, can you go back to the text, please, Pati? Vaishnavi, I was going to ask you just to talk about one thing that I found very, very interesting and important. Of course, everything in the purport is important. In the next part, go down to the purport. Yeah. But the transcendental process is described in chapter 2 of the Bhagavad Gita. To hear about Krishna from authority, that is the actual Vedic process. And those who are actually in the Vedic line hear about Krishna from authority. And by repeated hearing about him, Krishna becomes very dear. Krishna becomes dear. So can you comment on that?
I don't know what to comment on it. So we are hoping to do that. And that is why we are hearing about Krishna right now, discussing about him.
From authority. We're hearing from authority. And in the Bhagavad Gita, it tells us who the authority is, right? The self-realized soul can impart knowledge because he has seen the truth. So we're hearing from the authority, and by continuous hearing, then Krishna becomes very dear and we fall in love with Krishna. And since I am becoming a transcendental sentimentalist, not only a sentimentalist, This really struck me. Fall, it becomes very dear. That's what we want. So we have to hear from the right person. Thank you, Vaishnavi. Amy, would you like to continue reading the next verse?
Yes, I would. Thank you. So, I offer my respects to everybody. Hare Krishna. Bhagavad-Gita 11:53. The form which you are seeing with your transcendental eyes cannot be understood simply by studying the Vedas, nor by undergoing serious penances, nor by charity, nor by worship. It is not by these means that one can see me as I am. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The Krishna first appeared before his parents Devaki and Vasudeva in a four-handed form, and then he transformed himself into the two-handed form. This mystery is very difficult to understand for those who are atheists or who are devoid of devotional service. For scholars who have simply studied Vedic literature by the way of speculation or out of mere academic interest, Krishna is not easy to understand, nor is he to be understood by persons who officially go to the temple to offer worship. They make their visit, but they cannot understand Krishna as he is. Krishna can be understood only through the path of devotional service, as explained by Krishna himself in the next verse.
Very good. Thank you, Amy.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Madhurya, can you read the next verse? Madhurya Leela?
Haribo. Yes,
Haribo.
Haribo. Sorry.
Hare Krishna.
Okay. Bhagavad Gita 11:54. My dear Arjuna, only by undivided devotional service can I be understood as I am, standing before you, and thus can be seen directly. Only in this way can you enter into the mysteries of my understanding. Purport. Krishna can be understood only by the process of undivided devotional service. He explicitly explains this in this verse. So unauthorized commentators who try to understand Bhagavad Gita by the speculative process will know that they are simply wasting their time.
Go on.
One who has unflinching devotion for the Supreme Lord and is directed by the spiritual master can see the Supreme Personality Godhead by revelation. For one who does not take personal training under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master, it is impossible even to begin to understand Krishna. The word "tu" is especially used here to indicate that no other process can be used, can be recommended, or can be successful in understanding Krishna. The personal form of Krishna, the two-handed form, and the four-handed form are completely different from the temporary universal form shown to Arjuna. The four-handed form is Narayan, and the two-handed form is Krishna. They are eternal and transcendental, whereas the universal form exhibited to Arjuna is temporary. The very word sudurdarsham, it means difficult to see. It suggests that no one saw that universal form. It also suggests that amongst the devotees, there's no necessity of showing it. That form was exhibited by Krishna at the request of Arjuna because in the future, when one represents himself as an incarnation of God, people can ask to see his universal form. Krishna changes form from the universal form to the four-handed form of Narayan and then to his own natural form of two hands. This indicates that the four-handed form and other forms mentioned in Vedic literature are all emanations of the original two-handed Krishna. He is the origin of all emanations. Krishna is distinct even from these forms, not to speak of the impersonal conception.
Thank you, Madhurya. Here we go. Here we see again that Srila Prabhupada is talking about very repeatedly hearing from the spiritual master directly. Can you comment some more about this verse, Madhurya?
Yeah, I was going to say that Prabhupada stressed on that you need to hear from the spiritual master in order to achieve any success. And then it struck me at the beginning of the purport. It says undivided devotional service. It has to be attentive, undivided. Otherwise, you don't achieve, the result just by doing it rotely. Needs to be done with attention and love.
Yeah, and what you give to something, you get out of it. That what verse in the
Yes.
Bhagavad Gita? What's that verse in the Bhagavad Gita?
Yeah, as they surrender unto me, I
Right.
reward them accordingly.
Good. So that's it. Okay.
Another interesting point
Oh,
in this part of the chapter, it reveals that although the Almighty, Supreme Lord, God Almighty, when we think of that from a neophyte or even from a materialistic point of view, one would think that this omnipotent, omnipresent, all-powerful person and his magnificent manifestation of covering the entire universe would be much more powerful, much more interesting, much more godlike than sitting on a chariot with someone and speaking with him. But actually, what happens is like that verse, Vadanti tat tat vavidas tatvam yajganam advayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavan iti sabdyate. It was pointed out several times in this chapter that with that omnipotent, huge, gigantic universal form, one does not have intimate, loving relationships. So it's an interesting note that underlies the whole theme that actually the intimate, loving relationship with the person is more important and more relishable than simply an cognizance of his omnipotency.
And yet we must hear of his omnipotency to understand who it is we are loving and why there is so much instruction on how to do this. Is that a fact, Hati? Do you agree?
Yes, very much so. Good point.
Amy, are you following all this? Everything is good? Okay, if anyone has a question or anything, just let us know. Okay, so let's go on. And Anita, can you, oh, wait a second now. Anita. Okay, Bhadra and then Anita. Bhadra, unmute.
Hare Krishna, Dandavat everybody. Bhagavad-Gita 11:55. My dear Arjun, one who is engaged in my pure devotional service, free from the contaminations of previous activities and from mental speculation, who is friendly to every living entity, certainly comes to me. Purport. Anyone who wants to approach the Supreme of all of the personalities of Godhead on the Krishna Loka planet, the spiritual sky, and be intimately connected with the Supreme Personality Krishna, must take this formula as is stated by the Supreme himself. Therefore, this verse is considered to be the essence of Bhagavad Gita.
Okay, read the next one and speak a little
Continue.
louder.
The Bhagavad Gita is a book. The Bhagavad Gita is a book directed to the conditioned souls who are engaged in the material world with the purpose of lording it over nature and who do not know of the real spiritual life. The Bhagavad Gita is meant to show how one can understand his spiritual existence and his eternal relationship with the Supreme Spiritual Personality, and to teach one how to go back home, back to Godhead. Now here is the verse which clearly explains the process by which one can attain success in his spiritual activity, devotional service. As far as work is concerned, one should transfer his energy entirely to Krishna conscious activities. No work should be done by any man except in relationship to Krishna. This is called Krishna karma. One may be engaged in various activities, but one should not be attached to the results of his work, but the results should be done for him.
Thank you. Everyone understand that? Okay. Let's.
I have a question at this point. It appears that Krishna or Srila Prabhupada is stressing more here the work rather than the hearing. Before it seemed like you can't understand anything without hearing. So how do these two blend and work together? Why so much stress on work? Or why
Roger,
so
you
much
wanna
stress
answer
on
that?
hearing?
Rajaji?
No, I want to hear from, he is asking question, I want to hear from him because I have no answer.
No, you have to have an answer. You read the purport. Your turn.
Okay.
Let him go.
Okay. Go on. We're waiting.
No, seriously, I have no understanding. Tell you the truth. I would rather hear.
Okay. Patty, you want to answer it?
No, I want to hear someone.
Well,
I can
who
say
wants to answer?
something.
Oh,
Go ahead,
Madhurya.
So karma, you can't be you can't do nothing. You have to be engaged. So you have to do karma. So do it for Krishna. Be fully engaged in his service 100% of the time, and then you can think of him.
Is there
I
a
think that was
difference?
your question.
Is there a difference between karma and bhakti?
Not if it's done with 100%. For if you're cooking for Krishna, you're dearest-ing the deities, you're making money, but it's for Krishna all totally. Not that yes, if you're living in the temple and or even outside, but if you're totally 100% engaged in only Krishna's service, which comes in many different forms, and surrendering everything to them, then it's not different than bhakti.
What would we say then is the difference between Sudha Bhakti or pure devotional service? Krishna in this verse called it undivided devotional service and mixed devotional service. What is mixed devotional service? What's the difference between mixed devotional service and pure devotional service?
Well, mixed would be, in my understanding, that you say you're working outside and you give X% to Krishna for service, and then you need to keep some of it yourself to maintain your household, for example. So
you're saying that's mixed?
Well, I mean, if your family is devotees and then you're maintaining them, that's also really not mixed. But maybe there's tinges of maybe mixed could mean jnana. You have interest in jnana. What do you think?
Anybody else? I saw there's a couple hands raised.
There's a few hands.
Can I say my understanding of mixed devotional service?
Okay, say, and then Jayashree. Did you want to speak, Jayashree? What, my sweet Jayashree is
also
here.
Chaitanya,
okay.
Chaitanya.
And Chaitanya, yeah, we're gonna. Okay, this is a big topic. Okay, Vaishnava, you speak, and then Jayashree and Chaitanya.
Mixed devotional service is okay. So we have understood.
Where are you? Okay.
We have understood what is devotional service, but then we have not completely given up on what is, am I being seen that I'm doing devotional service?
I see.
No. Am I being seen nicely how nicely I do arti? Or am I being seen how nicely I lead kirtan? Or, so I can live in the temple 24/7. I can be doing service 24/7. But if I don't have that tendency, if that tendency is not gone away, then that is still mixed devotional service, as far as I am concerned.
Well, what about the fact that
that's my understanding.
That's
Krishna? Okay, I have a question here on that question. What about, because we all want to be encouraged in our devotional service. We're not living in a vacuum. We want to be acknowledged in some way. So Prabhupada gave us the supreme answer. We should act in such a way so that we will be noticed by Krishna. And we have all these books and all these spiritual teachings to understand how that is and to incorporate it within our hearts. And it is said in these purports, by the process of hearing and chanting, one becomes purified. This is the first purport. And Krishna becomes very dear to him. So if your main purpose is to please Krishna, that's how we transcend that false ego to be the best devotee, and everybody else will regulate.
I mean, we do eventually transcend, but in the path leading up to that point, we are not necessarily pure. I mean, we have control issue. We try to control other people. We try to put ourselves first. Oh, I do cake better than other people, whatever it is,
It's a process.
There's also another element, Samapriya, you brought up being noticed by Krishna. Is there a difference between that sentiment and being noticed by everybody else in the temple?
I would say there is.
Or in society. Of course there is.
I would say
what is the essence of why we want to be noticed by Krishna? What is the essential point? You didn't bring it up.
Okay. Well, actually, because we want to have a loving relationship with him. We want to have a loving relationship with him. And guess what? Krishna sees more of us than anyone else can. Okay.
But the point is in our discussion about mixed devotional service, if someone's performing an action for the pleasure of the beloved, the more that sentiment is magnified and dominant and pure, then that's love. Anything less than that, then for the pleasure of the beloved, if there's a mixture, that I'm doing it for my beloved, but I also want to be recognized by somebody else or by someone else or by everyone else. Want to get the headlines, want to get my name on the marquee, or I want some money, or I want something else besides the pleasure of the beloved. That's mixed.
Okay, so just to encourage everyone from this platform, and before we hear from Jayashree, it's a process. It's a process, and when we're experiencing this great love, it's just like if you have a child, you want to have that relationship. You want that child to exchange with you, and so it's a process to become purified, so that only thing we want is to please Krishna. So even if we are tinged materially, just keep hearing and chanting, as we heard just before, hearing and chanting, and we get purified, and then we fall in love with Krishna. Is that all right? Jayashree, unmute yourself, sweetie.
Oh, I don't know if this is still part of the answer, but it was just the thing that came to my mind when you first asked the question was the verse from Bhagavad Gita about work. That work done as a sacrifice for Vishnu has to be performed. Otherwise, binds you to the material world. So, it's all connected. You have to perform your duties for Krishna's satisfaction, and not do the mixed thing like you guys were just talking about. Yes, that's a verse. Okay. Yeah, and then you'll, be free from bondage. So that was the verse that came to my head immediately. So that's why I was like,
Perfect.
Okay.
Hearing from authority. Thank you, sweetie. That's a big one.
You're welcome.
Chaita, did you want to say something? Unmute yourself.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. Dandava Pranam. I was just answering Dhruva's question, but it seems like you've all answered it already. The basic difference between karma and devotional service is that karma, there's going to be a result. There's going to be a fruitive result, whether positive or negative, and it's usually produces another birth to collect those results. But devotional service is akarma, so there's no result. But
then there is also there's that verse, akarma sarva karma va moksha karma udarati. So whatever your desire is, engage in devotional service, so it will eventually all be fulfilled and purified. And Krishna doesn't need the go-ahead from us. Sometimes things happen in our lives and they feel like, Krishna's being so hard. He's just directing me on this one course. He's not having me, and then all of a sudden, you realize that that's his love. He is pulling us toward him. So I don't know.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's
That-
helpful. Thank you.
All right. Baja, are you cool? Did you want to speak some more on this before we continue?
You already said everything. I'm here listening.
Okay, so I think we're going to have Anita start the reading here.
Jai Shri Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Purpose by Srila Prabhupada. The word Mat Paramaha refers to one who considers the association of Krishna in his supreme abode to be the highest perfection of life. Such a person does not wish to be elevated to the higher planets, such as the moon or sun or heavenly planets, or even the highest planet of this universe, Brahmaloka. He has no attraction for that. He is only attracted to being transferred to the spiritual sky. And even in the spiritual sky, he is not satisfied with the merging into the glowing Brahmajyoti effulgence, for he wants to enter the highest spiritual planet, namely Krishna Loka, Goloka, Vrindavana. He has full knowledge of that planet, and therefore he is not interested in any other. As indicated by the word Mad Bhakta, he fully engages in the devotional service, especially in 9 processes of devotional engagement: hearing, chanting, remembering, worshipping, serving the lotus feet of the Lord, offering prayers, carrying out the orders of Lord, making friends with him, and surrendering everything to him. One can engage in all 9 devotional processes, or 8 or 7, or at least in one, and that will surely make one perfect. The term Sangha Varjitaha is very significant. One should disassociate himself from persons who are against Krishna. Not only are the atheistic person against Krishna, but also those who are attracted to fruitive activities and mental speculation. Therefore, the pure form of devotional service is described in Bhakti Rasamrit Sindhu as follows: Anabhilashita sunyam jnana karmadi anavritim anukulena Krishna Anushilanam Bhaktir Uttama. In this verse, Srila Rupa Goswami clearly states that if anyone wants to execute unalloyed devotional service, he must be free from all kinds of material contamination. He must be freed from the association of persons who are addicted to fruitive activities and mental speculation. When freed from such unwanted association and from the contaminated of material desires, one favorably cultivates knowledge of Krishna, and that is called the pure devotional service. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, thank you. Well, we have one more section to read for this purport. Shall we go on, or does someone have something to say before we do? Pati, just finish it now. Faye, could you read for us?
Yes, Mataji, good morning.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Purport continued. A Krishna-conscious person knows that if a man is suffering, it is due to his forgetfulness of his eternal relationship with Krishna. Therefore, the highest benefit one can render to human society is relieving one's neighbor from all material problems. In such a way, a pure devotee is engaged in the service of the Lord. Now, we can imagine how merciful Krishna is to those engaged in his service, risking everything for him. Therefore, it is certain that such persons must reach the supreme planet after leaving the body. In summary, the universal form of Krishna, which is a temporary manifestation, and the form of time, which devours everything, and even the form of Vishnu, four-handed, have all been exhibited by Krishna. Thus, Krishna is the origin of all these manifestations. It is not that Krishna is a manifestation of the original Vishvarupa or Vishnu. Krishna is the origin of all forms. There are hundreds and thousands of Vishnus, but for a devotee, no form of Krishna is important, but the original two-handed Swayam Sundara. In the Brahma Samhita, it is stated that those who are attached to the
Shamasundar,
thank you, form of Krishna in love and devotion can see him always within the heart and cannot see anything else. One should understand, therefore, that the purport of this 11th chapter is that the form of Krishna is essential and supreme.
Wow.
Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purports to the 11th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavad-Gita in the matter of the universal form.
Okay. Can you summarize that last purport, which is a very profound and very important purport, Faye? Can you give us some information on that?
Can try, but could you put the screen back, please? The words back, please.
Coming.
Thank you. For me, there's two things that stood out in what I just read. The final two lines of summarizing what we're supposed to be doing here, attaching to the two-handed form of Krishna in love and devotion, can see him always within the heart, can't see anything else. Thus, as a devotee, aspiring devotee, that's what I long to do. I think that's what everyone in this class longs to do. We want to see that form and have a relationship with Krishna in service and in love. The other thing that stood out where I just read today, if we're engaging everything we can in the service of the Lord, then that relates back to what we were talking earlier about karma yoga and working. Put our hearts, put our minds, put our activities, our focus in the service of the Lord and go forward from there. And if we can do that, look at the guarantee. The guarantee sentence is so profound. Therefore, it is certain that such persons must reach the supreme planet after leaving the body. What a goal to strive for. What a mercy, a benefit, an exciting sentence right there. And I think as a working person, I can see that there's so many people around me with the emphasis help this society, help that society, do this thing, do that thing. But the answer is not giving aid or shelter or whatever. The answer is showing them this beautiful light, this way to relieve all of their sufferings. And for me, that was the mission of Srila Prabhupada.
Sure.
He came here to relieve and give us in the Western speaking world and countries this light of how to love Krishna and how to solve all of these material problems. Because when we love Krishna 100%, those material problems seem to vanish and not bother us.
Very true. That's perfect. Thank you. And the first sentence of that part of the purport it speaks about how the suffering, forgetting Krishna creates suffering. So people are forgetting Krishna. They don't even know about Krishna. They're not thinking about Krishna. They're not being motivated to serve Krishna. So of course there's suffering in the world. But as devotees, we're very fortunate. And of course we have to share that great good fortune with others to help people remember Krishna in any way that we can, and also for ourselves to remember Krishna. So if does anyone, we're going to transfer now to the other river, back to the river of the Bhagavatam. I thought that was a really wonderful example that my husband gave this morning about the two rivers, the Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad-Gita. And then it just really thought that was beautiful. They're both discussing the same essence of things, the universal form.
Before we transition, are there any other questions or comments from Bhagavad-Gita from the last four lessons that we studied? Okay. Now we'll go on to chapter 7, further inquiries by Vidura. Once again, let me read these, and that will lead to a nice introduction. So this is third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 7, further inquiries by Vidura. Text 1. Sri Sukadev Goswami said, which brings us back to the conversation between Sukadev Goswami and Maharaj Pariksit. O king, while Maitreya, the great sage, was thus speaking, Vidura, the learned son of Dvaipayana Vyas, expressed a request in a pleasing manner by asking this question. So somebody else can read Sama, but I just wanted to introduce and bring that back so that it's clear what's going on now. We're switching back to this conversation between Vidura and Maitreya,
Okay.
and hearing the description of the universal form and the creation of the universe in its beginning stages inspired Vidura to ask the following questions.
Okay. Gopa, would you like to read?
Start
Sure.
with text 2.
Yeah, start with text 2 and then the next slide.
Okay. Vidura Uvacha. Oh no. Sri Vidura said, O great Brahman, since the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the complete spiritual whole and is unchangeable, how is he connected with the material modes of nature and their activities? If this is his pastime, how do the activities of the unchangeable take place and exhibit qualities without the modes of nature? Purport by Srila Prabhupada. As described in the previous chapter, the difference between the Supersoul, the Supreme Lord, and the living entities is that the activities of the Lord in creating the cosmic manifestation are performed by the Lord through the agency of his multifarious energies. But this manifestation is bewildering to the living entities. The Lord is therefore the master of the energies, whereas the living entities are subjugated by them. By asking various questions about transcendental activities, Vidura is clearing the misconception that when the Lord either descends to the earth in his incarnation or appears himself with all his potencies, he too is subjected to the influence of Maya, just like an ordinary living entity. The Lord is described in this verse as Chin Matra, or completely spiritual. The personality of Godhead has unlimited potencies to create and manifest many wonderful things, both temporary and permanent. Because this material world is the creation of his external energy, it thus appears to be temporary. It is manifested at certain intervals, maintained for some time, and again dissolved by conserved in his own energy. But with the creation of his internal potency, the spiritual world is not a temporary manifestation like the material world,
but is eternal and full of transcendental knowledge, opulence, energy, strength, beauties, and glories. Such manifestations of the Lord's potencies are eternal and are therefore called nirguna, or free from all tinges of the modes of material nature, even up to the mode of material goodness. The spiritual world is transcendental even to material goodness, and thus is unchangeable. Since the Supreme Lord of such eternal and unchangeable qualities is never subjugated by anything like material influence, how can his activities and form be conceived to be under the influence of illusory Maya, as is the case with the living entities? As
Wow.
is the case with the living entities, question mark. Hare Krishna.
Wow. Very.
Subjugated.
What do you think? What do you think
Oh,
about it?
Well, there's always hope. There's always
There
hope.
is hope.
There's
Very
hope,
hopeful.
but my goodness, this is so much knowledge, and on one page and one purport, it's just like whew, Krishna, Krishna.
Yeah.
It's nice to there was one thing I forgot. Let me see. Basically, I think Prabhupada's just saying, that keep going, keep trying. This knowledge will come if we just keep engaging in this process.
Keep hearing. That's what it said in the first. That's what it said in the Bhagavad-Gita, the first verse that we heard. By continuing this process of hearing and chanting, which is when people speak of devotional service, when we read about devotional service in all of these transcendental literatures, it's what are the two things that are mentioned first? The two, Bhadra, what are the two things? Bhadra?
Unmute,
Bhadra. We want to know those two most important things in devotional service that Prabhupada talks about always.
Hearing and chanting.
Shravanam Kirtanam. The watering process.
Go ahead. Yeah, linking on to that or piggybacking on it, he points out here, by asking various questions about the transcendental activities, Vidura is clearing a misconception that when the Lord either descends on earth or in his incarnations or appears himself with his potencies, he too is subjected to the influence of Maya like an ordinary living entity. He asked, since the Supreme Personality of Godhead is complete spiritual whole and unchangeable, how is he connected with the material modes of nature and their activities? If this is his pastime, how did the activities of the unchangeable take place and exhibit qualities without the modes of nature? In other words, if the modes of nature are working in the universe and the Lord is beyond them, then how does he enter into the universe and perform activities? Because the modes of material nature are actually what's happening here. So it takes intelligence and it takes spiritual understanding to understand how and why, when Krishna comes here, he acts differently. He might act like a human being or like one of the entities in the material world, but he's actually not. And if we revert back to how Prabhupada just explained at the end of the Bhagavad-Gita chapter, how the Supreme Lord manifested the entire universal form, then a four-armed form, and then switched back to his two-armed form, all while sitting on the chariot. So if he can do that, then certainly he can come and perform activities in the material world without being affected by it. That's kind of what's so beautiful about the blending of these two rivers. Like when the two rivers come together, the Ganges and the Jamuna, they come together in Prayag. One is kind of a sandy beige color, and the Jamuna is a dark sham color. And when they mixed, in the beginning, you can see the colors are not, they're still distinct. The qualities of one are in the other. And they're blending. They're not all one. Like when you get to Mayapur, there's no real difference. You can't tell the difference because they've been traveling together for such a long time. But it's beautiful to see these two mixtures of how the Lord's manifesting himself. And then the question reverts back to that understanding.
Thank you. That's beautiful. Shall we go on?
Sure.
Tisha, would you like to read?
Yes, thank you. Good morning, everybody.
Hare
Purport
Krishna.
by Srila Prabhupada continued. The Lord's transcendental knowledge and potency always remain the same. They do not change, even when displayed in the material world. As stated in Bhagavad-Gita, the Lord descends to the earth by his own internal potency, and therefore there is no question of his becoming materially contaminated, changed, or otherwise affected by the modes of material nature. The very word chinmatratva is the guarantee that the Lord's activities are always transcendental, even when displayed in the material world. His activities are as good as the Supreme Personality himself. Otherwise, liberated devotees like Sukadeva Goswami would not have been attracted by them. Vidura inquired how the Lord's activities can be in the modes of material nature, as is sometimes miscalculated by persons with a poor fund of knowledge. The inebriety of the material qualities is due to the difference between the material body and the spirit soul. The conditioned soul's activities are displayed through the medium of the modes of material nature and are therefore perverted in appearance. However, the Lord's body and the Lord himself are one and the same, and when the Lord's activities are displayed, they are certainly non-different from the Lord in all respects. The conclusion is that persons who consider the Lord's activities material are certainly mistaken.
Thank you. Leave this slide for a moment. The last two sentences, starting from however. Read that again.
However, the Lord's body and the Lord himself are one and the same, and when the Lord's activities are displayed, they are certainly non-different from the Lord in all respects. The conclusion is that persons who consider the Lord's activities material are certainly mistaken.
So can you explain that to me in a practical manner?
Well, I think Prabhupada's trying to drive home the fact that if it's Krishna, if it's his activities or anything, it's different. It's Krishna. It's always Krishna. No matter if it's his words, his form, the activities he performs, it's always Krishna. And he is the controller and we are the subjugated, controlled. And so I think that's, if you don't understand that, you're not going to, progress in developing love of Krishna as the creator. I don't know.
Okay, no, that was good. The first part, particularly in reference to what I was asking, all of this devotional service is non-different than Krishna. So as we're engaging in devotional service, we are actually associating with Krishna and become purified. And that's why, of course, in this age, the Yuga Dharma is chanting. Why? Because just by saying Krishna's name, which is non-different than Krishna, we are associating with him. So, and also I see that we're reading so nicely, all of these purports. This is how to read Srila Prabhupada's books very deeply, because everything that Prabhupada says, just as Gopa was saying, everything that he says is so significant. Most things in the mundane world are extremely insignificant. But now we hear with great significance that actually can save us. It's to save us and give us hope, as someone was saying in the beginning. Very wonderful. Thank you. That was
before we go on. I also want to hear. You stressed the point of the last two sentences, but the sentences just before that, perhaps you can choose somebody to speak on these and explain the difference between Krishna's activities and the individual living entities.
Okay, would anyone like to, here they are. Who wants to speak on that? Chaita, you want to speak on that?
I'm looking at it now. The inebriety of the material qualities is due to the difference between the material body. Okay, so in the material world, we are ensconced in our body, and we neglect the soul, like the bird in the cage. We keep feeding the body, but we forget to nourish the soul. And I really appreciate this this sentence saying, our activities are perverted in appearance, because they're misdirected. They're misdirected towards something that's temporary, and the results are here and gone. And therefore, there's so much work that is being done wastefully, and we're not investing in the proper source.
I think if we look at Vidura's question, it clarifies. Let's look at this sentence so I don't get lost here. The conditioned soul's activities are displayed through the medium of the modes of material nature and are therefore perverted in appearance. And Vidura's question was, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the complete spiritual whole, and is unchangeable. How is he connected with the material modes of nature and their activities? If it's his pastimes, how do the activities of the unchangeable take place and exhibit qualities without the modes of nature? And the point that Samapriya was pointing out was that this part about the Lord, that he's completely, he and himself, his body and his activities are one and the same, whereas the living entity, the only way we can express ourselves is through the medium of this body, which is made up of the modes of material nature and interacts with them. So when we conceive of the Lord in that way, it's not correct. It's improper.
Okay.
Thinking that he comes here.
Okay, there's one thing that we could mention here is that devotional service is on the spiritual platform. So even though we are using the modes of nature, we are relating through the body. This is our only tool. We have a choice to go one of two ways, spiritually or materially. We can use our energy to in this material body to engage in devotional service, and then we actually can come to the platform of purity and spirit. We have no choice but to use what our material situation, but it becomes more and more spiritualized. The material energy loses its grab when we engage in devotional service. So the same thing, Prabhupada uses the example, next door, these people are living in a house and they're going to work. We're also living in a house. We're worshiping Krishna now as a temple. We're working by distributing Prabhupada's books, by making offerings to the Lord. We're engaged in devotional service. So though they might look the same, they're actually not the same. Is that right?
Yes, but before we continue, I just want to stress that Vidura's questions in this particular section are not geared toward the living entities. He wants to know more about the Lord and his activities.
And so that would be the difference between the Lord and the living entities.
Or because because the topic is the creation of the world and how the Lord enters into it and performs pastimes in his incarnations. So his whole theme is chased to that concept.
Okay, everyone get that? Let's go on with Jayashree. Would you like to read this and then the purport after?
Sure. 3:7, text 3. Boys are enthusiastic to play with other boys or with various diversions because they are encouraged by desire. But there is no possibility of such desire for the Lord, because he is self-satisfied and detached from everything at all times. Purport. Since the Supreme Personality of Godhead is one without a second, there is no possibility that anything besides him can exist. He expands himself by his energies in multi-forms of self-expansions and separated expansions as well.
just as fire expands itself by heat and light. Since there is no other existence besides the Lord himself, the Lord's association with anything manifests his association with himself. That's confusing. In Bhagavad Gita 9:4, the Lord says, Mayatatamidam sarvam jagada vyaktamurtina matstani sarvabhutani nachaham teshvavastita. The complete manifestation of the cosmic situation is an expansion of the Lord himself in his impersonal feature. All things are situated in him, and yet he is not in them. That is the opulence of the Lord's attachment and detachment. He is attached to everything, and yet he is detached from all.
Okay, so go back and talk about, let's go back to that text. Jayashree said it was a little confusing. So let's see if we can figure
Well,
out.
I think then it kind of cleared up after that verse. I was about boys being plain.
Yeah, the verse. Put the there you go.
Okay, there you go. Okay, so what do you want me to say? How I understand it?
Yeah, sure, if you want to. I mean, I want to make sure you said you were confused, but then you said you kind of got it. So how did you get it? Let us know how you got it.
Oh, on the last part of the purport, when he talks about all things are situated in him, yet he is not in them, and he is attached to everything, yet he's not attached. I was just confused by the multi-forms of self-expansions and separated expansions. It's just the words.
But you know what? It's confusing. It is confusing. I mean, can you imagine a person who is the Lord's? He at the same time he's attached, and at the same time he's detached. Now that you have to contemplate that a little bit to figure that one out.
He has all those qualities incomplete. He's completely. Oh God, what are all those things? I can't remember.
Full in himself.
He possesses all beauty, knowledge, renunciation, so
opulences,
all the opulences. So if he possesses, all renunciation, then he's, detached. He's
good. Perfect. That's beautiful. Thank you. That was very clearly explained. Okay, let's go on with thank you, Jayashree. Chaita, would you read the next one? Chaita Mai?
Yes, Mataji. Srimad Bhagavatam 374. By his self-sheltered potency of the three modes of material nature, the Lord has caused the creation of this universe. By her, he maintains the creation and conversely dissolves it again and again. Purport. This cosmic universe is created by the Lord for those living entities who are carried away by the illusory thought of becoming one with him by imitation. The three modes of material nature are for the further bewilderment of conditioned souls. The conditioned living entity, bewildered by the illusory energy, considers himself a part of the material creation due to forgetfulness of his spiritual identity. And thus, he becomes entangled in material activities life after life. This material world is not for the purpose of the Lord himself, but is for the conditioned souls who wanted to be controllers due to misuse of their God-gifted minute independence. Thus, the conditioned souls are subjected to repeated birth and death.
Okay, so now explain how this is unnatural. It is an unnatural condition for the soul, and therefore, and this plan of Maya is very strong to keep us in illusion because it is unnatural for us to what?
It is unnatural for us to aspire to become one with with God, to become God ourselves. It's unnatural.
It is unnatural.
And therefore we think we're going to become that if we just keep pursuing these fruitive activities. And we keep trying and trying, and we keep getting smashed. But somehow people's faith in their fruitive activities is so strong. It's so strong. People keep hoping against hope, and and it only yields more birth, disease, old age, and death. I mean, what a horrific dilemma we are in. This is great. The three modes are for the further bewilderment of, so it's just misunderstanding upon misunderstanding. It's so difficult. But by the grace of Lord Krishna and the Guru, we have the information and the technology to get out of this bewilderment.
Great. Very good. But it's a good plan. Maya has a very good plan, right? We cannot defeat her. We cannot defeat her. The only thing we can do is hear from a self-realized soul and give up our desire to be the controller. Really, but we got the answer. Don't worry. We got the process, and this is part of it.
You did great.
Okay. So next, how about Ian? Oh, and Elizabeth. After Ian, Elizabeth, if you could read. Ian, are you there with us?
Hare Krishna, I'm here. Are you hearing me?
Yes, loud and clear. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Okay, so 3.7.5. The pure soul is pure consciousness and is never out of consciousness, either due to circumstances, time, situations, dreams, or other causes. Or then does he become engaged in patience. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The consciousness of a living being is always present and never changes under any circumstances, as above mentioned. When a living man moves from one place to another, he is conscious that he has changed his position. He is always present in the past, present, and future, like electricity. One can remember incidents from his past and can conjecture about his future also on the basis of past experience. He never forgets his personal identity, even though he is facing awkward circumstances. Or then can the living entity become forgetful of his real identity as pure spirit soul and identify with matter unless influenced by something beyond himself.
Want to continue?
Okay, purport continued. The conclusion is that the living entity is influenced by the avidya potency, as confirmed in both the Vishnu Purana and the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam. The living entities mentioned in Bhagavad-Gita 7.5 as Prakriti, and in the Vishnu Purana as he is mentioned as a Parashakti, is part and parts of the Supreme Lord as potency and not as a potent. The potent can exhibit many potencies, but the potency cannot equal the potent at any stage. One potency may be overcome by another potency, but to the potent or the potencies are under control. The Jiva potency or the Setagya Shakti of the Lord has the tendency to be overpowered by the external potency and avidya karma samgya, and in this way is placed in the awkward circumstances of material existence. Living entity cannot be forgetful of his real identity unless influenced by the avidya potency. Because living entity is prone to the influence of the avidya potency, it can never equal the supreme potent.
Very good. Yeah, that's so. What do you think? I mean, what about that? We were wondering, what is the thing that keeps the conditioned soul? It has to be something stronger than the conditioned soul to keep us in the material world. So what is that? What is that? You just said it several times.
Yeah, the avidya potency.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Influence of the modes of material nature.
Right. Exactly. So this word vidya means knowledge.
Knowledge.
Avidya means not knowledge, ignorance. So that there is a potency of the Lord that is used to keep the conditioned soul in illusion.
Yeah.
So we're tied in here. Patsy, did you want to say something about that one?
Just one point that comes to mind is that Srila Prabhupada's purport explains it in a concise, simple way. We can say that it's the avidya potency. But Vidura is asking Maitreya this question, how the pure conscious soul becomes confused. And the entire explanation of the creation are the details of this concise point. He explains how the avidya potency works. I think a few weeks ago, I gave a nice example that I like anyway. If you watch a magician perform a trick, like sawing a person in half, and somebody says, well, it's a trick. There's actually two people. You don't know the details, but when you actually see it visually, how the magician takes the boxes, how they're constructed, how two people can sit in them at the same time and appear like one because the head is on one side and the feet are on the other. By seeing the details, you understand how the trick is constructed, and therefore its illusion is not as powerful.
So we have to see the details.
That's what will be described as in Maitreya's answer.
Right. That's wonderful. Thank you. Let's just go on. We're almost at the end here. Elizabeth, would you like to read? Unmute. Unmute yourself, Elizabeth.
I'm unmuted.
Oh, okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, yes. Very good.
It was unmuted, but it didn't work. So I unmuted again. Srimad Bhagavatam 3.7.6, the Lord as the super soul is situated in every living being's heart. Why then do the living entities' activities result in misfortune and misery? Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The next question put forward by Vidura to Maitreya is, why are the living entities subjected to so many miseries and misfortunes in spite of the Lord's presence in their hearts as the super soul? The body is considered a fruitful tree, and the living entity and the Lord as super soul are like two birds seated in that tree. The individual soul is eating the fruit of the tree, but the super soul, the Lord, is witnessing the activities of the other bird. A citizen of the state might be in miseries for want of sufficient supervision by the state authority. But how can it be possible that a citizen suffers from other citizens while the chief of the state is personally present? Continued. From another point of view, it is understood that the jiva, living entity, is qualitatively one with the Lord, and thus his knowledge in the pure state of life cannot be covered by nescience, especially in the presence of the Supreme Lord. How then does the living entity become subjected to ignorance and covered by the influence of Maya? The Lord is the Father and protector of every living entity, and he is known as the Bhutabrit, or the maintainer of the living entities. Why then should the living entity be subjected to so many sufferings and misfortunes? It should not be so, but actually we see that it happens everywhere. This question is therefore put forward by Vidura for solution.
Unmute, Sama.
Thank you. That I can't wait to find the answer to that one. I'm really that seems like the perfect solution. Prabhupada's so kind to give us these books. Shall we? Did you have something to say about this verse? Oh, here we're going to go to the last one. Then we'll have a discussion. There are two people who didn't read, and I really don't know how to relate to you other than Samsung and then the whole big long telephone number here.
Mataji, Samsung is Manvantara.
Oh, right. Manvatara told me that she couldn't read because something is happening with her computer. And who is the other one? 352-660-5012. Is there anyone?
I don't know. You don't have to, because they are only joined here by audio, so don't worry about it.
Okay, well, I didn't want to exclude anyone. Why don't you finish up for us, Vaishnavi, and read this last verse?
Okay. Srimad Bhagavatam, 3.7.7. O great and learned one, my mind is greatly illusioned by the distress of these nations, and I therefore request you to clear it up. Such mental bewilderment, as represented here by Vidura, takes place for some living entities, but not for everyone. For if everyone were bewildered, there would be no possibility of a solution by higher personalities.
Thank God for that. Okay, would anyone like to bring up something about what we've read? This, I'm so excited because the solution is just now coming. But and I'm also happy that there are people who are not subordinate to the illusory energy, and that's the bona fide person to hear from. So who has something else to comment before we conclude? This has been such a wonderful, profound reading. That's what happens with Prabhupada's books. We just get bathed. The soul gets bathed. Vajra, you have something else to say? Vajraji? He signed out, I think. Anyone else? Chaitamayi, would you like to say something else? Faye?
Hare Krishna, thank you. I was seeing that with text 2 and 5, these questions are actually answered, at least initially, in the purport.
Right.
So I can appreciate that, and I think it's wonderful. But I also am very excited to hear how Maitreya answers these questions. And isn't he going to answer them with stories and
there's a lot of different descriptions, many pastimes, and also many conclusions. Of course, Prabhupada's kind to give us a little bit of an answer in these perfect literatures. Tisha has a question.
Yes, thank you, Mataji. When I was reading this, there seemed to be a part in the purport where there was a reference to there was a time when we were not fallen spiritual souls, that. And so am I right? Like, was there a time when we were not in this position of material, of not knowing who we truly are? And if so, like, when was that?
Okay, I'm gonna answer in two ways. First, even in this life, there are some times when we are in illusion, and sometimes where we snap out of it. The material energy has less hold. Don't you find that? We're all devotees here. We have the tools. We're chanting. We're reading. We're getting realizations. Sometimes the material energy lessens its hold on us due to hearing from the self-realized soul, right? That does happen. Isn't it, Tisha? Do you experience that at all?
Yeah, I think so.
Of course.
I think so.
Yeah. So this question is like the age-old question, and Prabhupada gives the answer. If there's a fire in the house, don't waste time looking for the match. We are eternal. We have an eternal relationship with Krishna. We are in an illusion, covered up state, and we see how tight. Everything will be cleared up for all of us. We have to have that much faith. We really do. To analyze what we're doing here, just analyze what's going on right now. and see when you are being affected by the modes of nature and when you are protecting yourself by the shield of the holy name and devotional service. So that would be my conclusion. Patti, would you like to add to that?
There are several places where Srila Prabhupada discusses the topic. And one of the ones that satisfies my inquiry is that he says, quoting a Sanskrit verse, that it's anadi, without beginning. In other words, he says, since time immemorial, it cannot be traced out. So if something really can't be traced out because it happened such a long time ago and there's no trace of it, then to try to pursue that which is inconceivable really doesn't make much sense. So as Sama just gave that one example of the match and the fire, that was one of the examples he gave. Another is two people sitting under a tree, and there's two crows there on the tree as well. And just as a crow takes off, the fruit falls down onto the ground. And one of the men says, "Oh, look, because the bird left, the fruit fell down." And the other one said, "No, it didn't happen that way. The fruit fell in the tree, and the bird just happened to fly at the same time." So they can argue infinity, trying to figure out what actually caused that fruit to fall, and they'll never really know. So he explains that it's not really worthy question to go all the way back and spend a lot of time in it. But that satisfied my example, my intelligence, that it happened since time immemorial. It can't be traced out. So go from here and progress forward.
I'd like to add one more thing, that when one becomes self-realized, it will be very familiar. It will be very familiar when we actually get that hug from Krishna.
Yeah.
It will be very familiar.
Yeah. All right.
Ian, can you add to that?
This all reverts very nicely back to this question by Vidura. The pure soul is pure consciousness and is never out of consciousness, either due to circumstances, time, situations, dreams, or other causes. How then does he become engaged in nescience? And that will be described by Maitreya in our study.
Stay tuned. Stay tuned for the absolute truth. Okay, so is that it for today? Sweet, sweet devotees.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. It's very, very, very
Hi, everyone.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna.
Have a great week.
Thank you.
You too. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.